In this video, we will be discussing how tests are made. In this discussion, we will add some of the why for why assessments must be reliable, fair, and unbiased. Assessments must measure higher-order cognitive skills that allow students to transfer their learning to new situations and problems. In addition, assessments must have high fidelity of the critical abilities as they will be used in the real world, rather than through artificial proxies. This calls for performances that correctly evaluate such fields as oral, written, and multimedia communication, cooperation, research, experimentation, and the use of new technologies. Assessments should be internationally benchmarked. This means that they should be evaluated against those of the leading education countries in terms of the kind of tasks they present, as well as the level of performance that they expect to help our students be competitive in the global market. We should use items that are instructionally sensitive and educationally valuable. This means tests should be designed so that the underlying concepts can be taught and learned, rather than depending mostly on test-taking skills or reflecting students' out-of-school experiences. To support instruction, they should also offer good models for teaching and learning, and insights into how students think as well as what they know. Lastly, assessments must be valid, reliable, and fair, in order to accurately evaluate students' abilities and appropriately assess the knowledge and skills they intend to measure, be free from bias, and be designed to reduce unnecessary obstacles to performance that would undermine their validity. They should also have positive consequences for the quality of instruction and the opportunities available for student learning. Most summative assessments these days are using evidence-centered design principles. A key concept that guides each of these steps in the evidence-centered design. Evidence-centered design provides a framework that helps clearly define the interpretations or claims assessments want to make about students and their cognition, the observations that provide evidence needed to support those claims, and the types of items and tasks needed to collect that evidence. While alignment between standards and items or tasks remain important, strong emphasis is also placed on ensuring that each item and task elicits evidence about the target of the assessment that can be used to support a claim about the student's development of knowledge, skills, and/or abilities contained in the content standard. Standard 4.2. In addition to describing intended uses of the test specifications should define the content of the test, the proposed test length, the item formats, the desired psychometric properties of the test items, and the test, and the ordering of items and sections. It is important to start with that end in mind. What will you be reporting out? Scale scores, subscales, achievement level, information, mastery? The test development process starts with the framework development, which we have covered in modules before this. From framework development, we can then go on to the content specifications. Content specifications define specifically what will be measured in assessment. For example, it may not be possible to measure all of the performance expectations in the NGSS due to time constraints or even policy emphasis on key concepts. In this document, test writers describe what it is that the student should be tested on. The next aspect of the development process is the item specifications. For example, this document describes what item types will be created, what standards will be measured, including multi-part alignments, grade appropriateness, what rigor or range of rigor will be included, what allowable responses look like, and what evidence is required. Sometimes item specifications will include examples as a model for what assessing this information will look like through the use of an example item. After the item specifications have been written, item writers use the document to guide their development of items. Item writers are highly trained to develop items that are free of bias and sensitivity. In addition, item writers try to develop items that are clear, consistent, written in plain language, and produce only one correct option, unless otherwise stated. After items have been vetted, they are field tested with students. Field testing means that students take the actual items and the performance is used to inform whether the items will become operational or not. After field testing, the items are scored for performance and analyzed. Scoring includes ensuring rubrics are appropriate for scoring constructed response items and performance tasks. And the analysis of each scored item is examined for how groups of students respond and for any nuances that may prevent the item from becoming operational. Items that have passed all of these checks will become operational and administered to students. Administered items go through another scoring and analysis process similar to the field-tested items. However, these items will also be used to set performance level descriptors or achievement levels. Operational items and student performances can now be reported to the public. This is one of the main reasons why tests should be developed with the end goal in mind. In other words, what do we hope to get out of these results? Let's take a look at an item to explore how the concept of evidence-centered design informs thinking about the item. Here's an item that asks students to consider. Scientists are studying the evolutionary history of a group of plants in the United States, and they develop an evolutionary tree as shown below. The task model specifies that this should be a selected response multiple choice item format. And the evidence is intended to support a claim that a student can analyze and interpret data for patterns in the fossil record that document the existence, diversity, extinction, and change of life forms throughout the history of life on Earth, under the assumption that natural laws operate today as they did in the past. Given the alignment between the claim about the assessment target, the evidence required in the task model, and finally the item, it can be said that this item is designed appropriately to collect evidence from students that will support the intended claim. For students who produced a correct response, the item provides evidence that supports the claim. However, for our formative science work, potentially this check for understanding may be more appropriate in a constructed response format to really get at what students know about evolutionary relatedness and using cladograms. For those students who produce an inaccurate response to this item, the item provides evidence that supports a claim that the student has not yet developed full understanding of evolutionary trees. Standards that apply to fairness. Standard 3.2. Test developers are responsible for developing tests that measure the intended construct and for minimizing the potential for tests being affected by construct irrelevant, such as linguistic, communicative, cognitive, cultural, physical, or other characteristics. For example, this is one of the main concerns with going to an online test format. Many have argued that it introduced construct irrelevance. However, there's been much research to show that if we actually use technology-enabled items the way they should be used as opposed to taking a paper form and just applying it in an online format, we can really dig much deeper. Standard 3.3. Those responsible for test development should include relevant subgroups, validity, reliability and precision, and other preliminary studies used when they're constructing the test. And Standard 3.9. Test developers and/or test user are responsible for developing and providing test accommodations when appropriate and feasible to remove construct irrelevant barriers that otherwise would interfere with the examinee's ability to demonstrate their standing on the target constructs. Here we have standards that apply to the design and development. Standard 4.0. Tests and testing programs should be designed and developed in a way that supports the validity of interpretations of the test scores for their intended uses. Test developers and publishers should document steps taken during the design and development process to provide evidence of fairness, reliability, and validity for intended uses for individuals in the intended examinee population. In Standard 4.2, in addition to describing intended uses of the test specification should define the content of the test, the proposed test length, the item formats, the desired psychometric properties of the test items and the test, and the ordering of the items and sections. Specifications for computer-based tests should include a description of any hardware or software requirements.